this the land of the free and the home of the brave? No. Is this a land with liberty and justice for all? No. Is this one nation, indivisible, under God? No. Either let us practice the democracy we are preaching, or shut up.
In my language, he was a God-sent man.
I shall try to cut my remarks down, but after all, I'm a Negro Baptist preacher, you know. Nobody can control a Negro Baptist preacher, even God sometimes can. But nevertheless, I will try to make them like a woman's skirts, long enough to be respectable, but short enough to be interesting.
Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. was the pastor of America's largest Protestant congregation, a seminal leader in the fight for racial justice, and a U.S. congressman. And his motives were often in dispute. But by 1965, he had become the most powerful black man in American political history.
The white liberal was monopolizing the Negro's civil rights fight.
That's right. It was Clay's thing. Clay's thing.
And he was allowing into his cartel, his monopoly, only those Negro liberals who would get along with him.
I like the way he thumbed his nose at white folks. Now, I tell you, that spoke to my heart. See, if you've had the black experience in America, it would speak to you.
He was saying things that we had not dared to think. The tone of his speech was one of real defiance, of real anger. It was scary what he was saying, but it was also exhilarating to hear him.
But once in a lifetime, a man like that comes along. Once in a lifetime.
Adam Clayton Powell, Jr. was born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1908. He was a pampered, privileged child. His mother dressed him in Little Lord Fauntleroy suits. He had blonde hair and hazel eyes. His father, Adam Clayton Powell, Sr., was the pastor of New York City's Abyssinian Baptist Church. By 1923, he had built it into the largest Protestant congregation in America and housed it in a magnificent new structure. And he built the new church in Harlem, the emerging capital of black life in America. Harlem in the 20s was bursting with visions of a new American Negro, freed from the economic and psychological legacies of slavery. His father shipped him to Colgate University, an all-male Baptist institution in New York State, 35 miles from the nearest town. Once there, Adam neglected to tell anyone that he was a Negro. He even pledged a white fraternity, until a routine background check revealed his identity. When Powell returned to New York in 1930, he found a city shattered by the Great Depression. In Harlem, where the suffering was greatest, grown men fought over scraps from a garbage can, and 63% of the children suffered from malnutrition. Immersed in a sea of misery, the new assistant pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church was shocked into action. He opened a free soup kitchen. He set up a job bank, an adult education center, a nursery school, youth programs, and a mental health clinic. Clothing was solicited, mended, and distributed to the needy. When a man came in one day for shoes and found none that would fit, Adam donated a pair of his own. In 1935, when a false rumor spread through Harlem that a boy had been shot and killed for shoplifting, a riot erupted which lasted for 2 days. In a series of articles in the New York Post, Powell established himself as the voice of Harlem's despair.
Adam thought that this was a good place to start and accomplish two things: get jobs to some people and establish himself as a hero and a fighter for black rights. Beautiful combination.
Under the banner, "Don't buy lie where you can't work, Powell helped establish picket lines from river to river along 125th Street. By that afternoon, the stores were closed. Powell smashed barriers to black employment in the telephone company and the power company, in the baking, pharmaceutical, and beverage industries, and at the 1939 World's Fair. In 1941, he was a leader of the nation's first racially motivated bus boycott, declaring that every Negro that rides a bus is lynching the Negro race. Powell secured jobs for black drivers and mechanics in New York's public transportation system.
He gave courage and leadership to a people who were hungering for someone to enunciate their feelings, their grief. And that was the grip he had on them.
To understand Powell is to understand how the black church could be used as it would later be used in the 1950s and the 1960s. And in that sense, he's an antecedent to the civil rights movement. But far more than an antecedent, he was an individual who demonstrated the power of the church as a protest instrument, the power of the church as a social instrument, the power of the church as a community organizing instrument, and the power of the church as a political instrument.
Everything that we are about as African people in terms of our struggle for justice and freedom started in the church. There is no separation of the sacred and secular, of church and state. In black America, there is no separation.
In 1941, Powell launched a newspaper, The People's Voice, as a forum for his views, and was elected to the New York City Council, the first black ever to hold the office. By the age of 32, Adam Powell was pastor of a 14,000-member church and leader of a mass movement which had obtained jobs for hundreds of Negroes. As a city councilman, he had all the publicity and prestige that went with the office, and his newspaper reached those thousands beyond political life. He was ready for bigger things. A new congressional district had been created for Harlem. Powell won the nomination of the Liberal, Democratic, and Republican parties. On Election Day 1944, he was swept into office, the first black man ever to sit in Congress from any of the northeastern United States.
But we know that we are the children of God, and there is a God who rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And if I'm right, thank God I'm right. He'll fight my battle, and I'll be free someday. Therefore, stand together, children. Work together, children. Fight together, children. Work together, children. Work together, children. Go together. Walk together, children. Don't you get weary. Great camp meet in the promised land.
Woke up this morning with my mind